All right, everybody, welcome back to the Learning Out Loud podcast. I'm your host, Dustin William. I have my co-host with me, Whitestone.
I shall now attempt to show how the most important of these principia have been crystallized into the pithy form of maxims and have influenced and developed that grand system of truth known as equity jurisprudence.
The power is neutral. It's sitting in the quintessence until you invoke it. All right, welcome everybody back to the Learning Out Loud podcast. I am your host, Dustin William, owner and producer over at True Life Productions. You can find all of our work at truelifeproduction.com. When you get there, you can check out All Aboard. That's my history documentary style show. A lot of interesting stuff in there. Connects to a lot of stuff we talk about here on the podcast and we will talk about later. I also have Article 3 articulations over there that you can check out for free. And I should be mentioning this, you can watch everything ad-free on the website, including the first hour. If you just go to the website, click on first hour, and then that's the whole, you can get the whole first hour of the show. You can download it, do whatever you want with it. Share it. I would appreciate that. You can get all of that from the website, everything on the website ad-free. And if you would like the second hour of the podcast that you were about to hear today, then all you have to do is click the Become a Member button right there. And for $8 a month, you can get all of the extra content that gets you access to all of the show notes, the transcripts, the second hour of the show, and a private Telegram group where me and Whitestone are both active in, dropping documentation. I just dropped an entire cache of documents in there, including most of the works of Joseph Story. I think I'm only missing one book from his works, and we're just going to be dropping all sorts of stuff in there, so it's going to be a great place to hang out. So now that we're done with the business, let's introduce our co-host, Whitestone. How's it going, man?
I'm doing great. Recovering from a small surgery, but this week after reading Stockholm Syndrome, you and I were talking off the air. We didn't realize what a rat's nest this was and how connected it is to a lot of the other things that we talk about. So I'm actually really excited to get into this.
Yeah. When you had brought this up as a show topic, it's something I obviously knew what it was. Everybody knows what Stockholm Syndrome was, and we'll understand why everybody knows what Stockholm Syndrome is. Why after we go through the show, but when Whitestone suggested it to me, I was like, okay, yeah, that sounds cool. I'll see if I can dig up 2 hours of information on that. And oh boy, we probably should have broken this into two shows, honestly, because there is so much here. It is absolutely unbelievable. And once you break it down into the chronological fashion that we are going to break it down into today, it's going to be so obvious that it's a psychological operation that, I don't know what other way to put it. You got anything you want to add to that before we jump into the timeline?
No, and the thing is, this point that I'm making, I actually really only came to this conclusion like 10 minutes ago, so it's still fresh. But I think that this event was a pivotal moment in the social engineering attempt. We're just kind of fresh out of the World War II era. You still have that floating around in the background. 1933 was only 40 years ago, so it would have been, if like our fathers, what they had done in their younger days, that was 1933. So there's a lot of social engineering, a lot of banking changes taking place. Everything socio-politically is getting completely restructured. And here we have the introduction of a massive psychological operation, which we're going to relate to probably a lot of other shows that we've already done. There's just so much packed into this theater play that you can draw parallels all day long to almost everything that we're experiencing today, up to and including the big debacle that happened 6 years ago. So quite a bit to get into.
Yeah, that's a great. And you know what I just thought about too is in 1973, that's when they you remember how they did that whole big report on the emergency war powers?
Yes.
And then they passed the whatever thing in Congress, and
Oh,
then
the IEEC something.
I can't remember exactly what it is.
Yeah.
You know what document I'm talking about, though, right? The
Yeah, I read it, and
635 pages of that.
basically it was like, hey, there's way too many national emergencies, you guys. There's like
Mhm.
too many. So
Yeah,
we
so
need to
they go through and they name them all, and they're like, "Hey, this gives the president basically dictatorial powers. He can do whatever he wants." So they're like, "We're going to cancel all of these emergencies, blah blah blah." But guess what? The one emergency that they did not cancel. You
Section
know which
5B.
one it is. It's Section 5B of the Act of October 16th, 1917, otherwise known as the Trading with the Enemy Act, or TWIA,
Hmm.
which is something we should probably start getting
As
into that
amended,
stuff here soon.
it was amended like 17 times. It was also, then amended by the Emergency Banking Relief Act in the very opening provision. So
Yeah, exactly. And it also says right in the act, it's a very short act. Yeah, everybody should go read it. And it says right in the act, the only way that this can be repealed is by the president.
yep,
So, and
nobody else.
that's exactly relevant to what we're living through today. There's actually a lot of talk. Did you see what's going on in Congress? Actually,
Uh, yeah.
they're reevaluating. They're trying to tell President Trump that he doesn't have the power to do what he's doing right now.
Do you think they're coaxing him into saying, actually, folks, guess what? I have,
Dude,
and I have for a while.
it has to be something related to it. It has to, because we know how it works. Like, he's allowed to do whatever the fuck he wants legally, lawfully. There's no fraud here. There is no fraud here. So, but yeah, my whole point is that was the same year as the Norrmalmstorg robbery, the Stockholm robbery. Same
Yeah,
fucking
and
year. So that just fits into all of the psychological operation, because obviously we have a dictator still. And then
yep,
so they need to make you understand that you love your dictator.
yep. Yeah,
So,
no, that's the thing. I think it really was a way, regardless if Stockholm, we'll get into this, regardless if Stockholm syndrome ever had any clinical validity,
yeah, we'll
what
get
was
into
not
that. Yeah.
what was not argued was its operational legitimacy and its operational framework when used in hostage negotiations. It was absolutely a dynamic that could be depended on, that could be encouraged, and absolutely could be manipulated by trained hostage negotiators. And that's a key point, because what they realize is if they can initiate Stockholm syndrome on a particular level, population of people, they can expand that out. Then they are able to control that dynamic because they understand psychologically what is happening, the relationships between people, and understanding all of those stations, they can more easily manipulate people and just keep up their reign of terror, really.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, we're kind of coming to the conclusion that this is one of the ways that they did that. So,
Yep.
let's get into it then. This picture I've got up here, this is from a book. I didn't read the book, but there is, if anybody wants to do an even deeper dive than we're going to do today, there is a book called 6 Days: The Story of Stockholm Syndrome, by David King. He wrote a whole book on this topic, but I think we're going to go through it pretty thoroughly. And today, because it's just such a silly situation. So let's get into it. So, the day of the robbery was August 23rd, 1973. So a guy named Jan Erik Olsson, Olsson, a convicted criminal on an authorized day leave from prison. So I don't know if it was a work release program or something like that he was on, but
I
for
believe
some
it said it was
reason,
a furlough.
okay, so he said he had some sort of furlough. So
Yes.
he was on some sort of furlough from prison, and he entered the Kritten This is all Swedish to me, so
It's
good luck.
it's similar to German. It's Kreditbanken.
Banken at the Norrmalmstorg Square in central Stockholm. Armed with a submachine gun to conceal his Swedish identity, he wore a disguise, a lady's wig, roughed cheeks, toy store spectacles, and dyed black mustache, and spoke exclusively in a fake American accent, which, I mean, what are we talking about right off the bat? So,
And
but so
there's a reason for that, and a lot of these little details are gonna, I think, make sense as we go along.
yeah, absolutely. So moving on with the robbery, Olson fired a round of shots into the bank ceiling to assert control. then shouted in English, not Swedish, in English, "The party has just begun," a phrase he had lifted from an American film about a convict on the loose. Okay, why is he referencing American films? He lives in Sweden. But the line was intended to project a specifically American brand of outlaw menace that he assumed would be unfamiliar and terrifying to Swedish civilians. Okay. Um, so the Swedish police were called immediately. 2 officers entered the bank. Olsen opened fire, injuring one plainclothes officer, Ingemar Warpfeld, in the hand. The second officer was ordered at gunpoint to sit down and sing a song. He chose Elvis Presley's Lonesome Cowboy, another American song, assuming that the apparently American gunman would respond favorably to his tune. So, he tricked him, huh? That's hilarious.
But he was also appeasing him too.
Oh, yeah, that's a great point. Yep, he was also
Which,
appeasing him, which goes right into, what Stockholm. Do you want to add something to that?
we're going to get into that later on once we get into academically contesting Stockholm Syndrome's validity. But what you see peppered throughout this entire narrative is they're acting as if Stockholm Syndrome is already a set in stone dynamic. And you actually see that in between a lot of the characters before the robbery, during the robbery, and in the media fury that followed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So Olsen seized 4 bank employees as hostages: Kristen Enmark, Elizabeth Oldgren, Brigitte Lundblad, and Sven Svalstrom. Yeah, he moved hostages into the main vault and forfeited his position. The bank had no other exits that could be used to evacuate civilians quickly. Okay, so Olsen issued 4 demands to the Swedish authorities: 3 million Swedish kronor, or approximately 710,000 USD, 2 handguns, bulletproof vest, and helmets for himself and the hostages, and a fast getaway car. A fast getaway car, that's number 3. And his 4th demand was the release and delivery to the bank of his imprisoned friend, Clark Olofsson, who was then serving a 6-year sentence at a correctional facility in Norrköping. Which what? Like, okay, so it's going to get even crazier later, but Swedish Public Broadcasting, SVT, began covering the hostage crisis in real time, making it the first criminal event in Swedish history to be broadcast on live television, which is a very important point.
That's so important. So,
yes.
Anyway, keep going.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, if we're talking about trauma-based programming, which is really what started, once TV came out, or maybe it was like a decade after TV kind of became, a staple in the household, they started with the trauma-based programming. I mean, here in the United States,
1963.
they filmed, yeah, you had the President Kennedy assassination, allegedly. And then you also had Vietnam, which is every single night they were showing, sons, brothers, uncles, and fathers getting blown to bits, trauma-based programming. And so then again, across the pond over in Sweden, 1973, they're also having an extremely terrifying, fearful event, which also serves as a psychological operation, not only for Swedish people, but also for the American public when they hear about it. And so this is just more, I really truly think that this was probably one of the big staple social engineering goes when it comes to trauma-based programming was 1973, just because it's linked to so much. And that's the thing, is like when people are barraged with violence on TV, they're already starting with the terror, which is a crucial element of Stockholm Syndrome.
Yeah, and they were able to get 2 events in on this thing: one pre-syndrome foundations and one post-syndrome foundations, which we'll get into in a little bit. So it's the first time a criminal event has ever been broadcast in Swedish history. So the broadcast drew national attention and drew crowds of onlookers to Norrmalmstorg Square. Press photographers and police snipers occupied rooftops overlooking the bank simultaneously. So that gets us in to the next thing that happened is the government authorized the release of his friend. So, Minister of Justice approves Olofsson's release. Swedish Minister of Justice Lentar Giger authorized police to transfer Clark Olofsson from his prison in Norrköping to Krettebanken at Norrmalmstorg. This was a deeply controversial decision. Olofsson was a career criminal with a long history of armed robbery and violence, but authorities judged it unlikely he was conspiring with Olsson and hoped his presence might de-escalate the standoff. So
Yeah,
Clark,
sure. It's like, okay.
Yeah, dude. So let me finish this and we'll talk about it. So Clark Olofsson was transferred to the from prison and physically handed over to Olsson at the bank entrance, astonishing observers and media. Olofsson entered the vault and Olsson in the Olsson and the four hostages. Police also provided a blue Ford Mustang getaway car with a full tank of fuel and the demanded ransom money. The one condition police and Swedish government refused to concede was allowing the hostages to leave the bank with the robbers. So, I mean, what the fuck are we even talking about? Right? Excuse my language, but what?
I think what this is if somebody's in a position where they hold the upper hand in the power dynamic, they can make whatever demands they want, whether they make sense or not, whether they go against conscience, whether they go against, like the state's political position, doesn't matter. If you're in a bargaining position with that much power and leverage, I think what they're just trying to show is that we can basically get what we want if we have hostages.
Yeah. So yeah, there's something. This is just. There's something like I cannot believe I should have really looked into this justice that let him out, dude. Because I mean, what was he doing in his past that he was convinced to let a career criminal out of his freaking cage to go help another career criminal in the exact and they're like, and they found, but the judges found it was unlikely he was conspiring with Olsson. Like, are you fucking kidding me?
But you know what's crazy is they also
asked for him by name.
So here's the thing: is in a lot of this language in this theater that we're reading, there are commercial banking terms that are used to describe the psychological kind of development of the term, and then also the bank itself. Because here we have, Sweden. Everybody's familiar that Sweden's got money, big financial center. It happened in a bank. It happened in a bank vault. The term Stockholm Syndrome was coined by a psychiatrist and then used in global currency everywhere else. That's another word that they use. So there's a lot of references to financial type things. And even in this piece that we're reading here, it was saying that he was physically handed over at the bank entrance. And they used the word delivered as well, because he said, what is it? One of his demands is that he wants, his friend delivered. And a lot of times, depending, there are situations with the bank teller has to put the money on the counter or when they have to put it directly into your hand.
Yeah.
And so
that is true. Yeah. That's
like,
very
I
true.
want somebody delivered to me. I'm writing an order. I want someone delivered to me. Please hand them physically over to me at the bank entrance. Yeah. So I don't know. It's there's something else too, because what a lot of people need to realize too is 1971, just 2 years prior, Nixon suspended payments in gold. So we see the big shakeup of the financial system, moving away from the gold standard. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think payments in gold meant not only to, people here in America that were banking, but it probably meant other countries too.
Oh yeah. It completely shifted the entire.
Oh, you got a guy dressed in a cowboy kicking in a Swedish bank saying, "Hey, party's just begun, boy. By the way,
yeah,
we ain't paying you in gold no more. I'm taking these women's, I'm taking these this nice fast car, and I'm gonna get out of here. By the way, I just developed a new psychological condition for everybody to leverage off of."
Yep. So let's let's keep digging onto the actual, because this was a 6-day standoff that this happened in. And it was day one that they gave they didn't even like try and resist any. They weren't like, nah, dude, we can't do that. They didn't try and negotiate. They're like, okay, except you can't leave with everybody.
Oh, he seemed really serious.
Right. He seems super serious, guys. Yeah. So from August 24th to August 27th, 1973, by the second day of captivity, all four hostages were addressing Olsen and Olofsson by their first names. The hostages began to perceive small acts of restraint, such as threats not being carried out, as genuine gestures of goodwill. Hostage Kristen Inmark would later state that she felt safer with the robbers than with the police surrounding the building, which that might be true. So, Jan Eric Olsen. Sorry, I get these names mixed up. They're so
they're
close.
hard.
Yeah, and they're so close. It's Olsen and Olofsson are the freaking robbers here. So Jan Erik Olsen gave one of the hostages his wool jacket when she became cold. He also gave her one of his bullets as a keepsake. Hostage Elizabeth Oldgren told Olsen she was experiencing claustrophobia in the vault. He permitted her to walk the bank floor while attached to a rope around her neck. Oldgren later described the act as kindness. So hostage Kristen.
That sounds like how people used to think during COVID.
Literally, yeah, yeah. Putting your masks on was an act of kindness, wasn't it? That's a great point.
Yeah. But you know what's crazy? He gave her one of his bullets as a keepsake, and he's like, hey, I got a bullet for you, but not in the way that you think.
Right. Yeah. So, hostage Kristen Inmark placed a direct telephone call to Swedish Prime Minister Olof Palme. She told Palme she fully trusted both Olsen and Olofsson, that they had treated the hostages well, and that her primary fear was not the captors, but the risk of violent police assault. She asked Palme to allow the robbers and the hostages to leave together in the getaway car. So, in the contrast to Inmark's call, Olsen also telephoned Prime Minister Palme directly and threatened to kill the hostages if police attempted to force entry. This threat reinforced the police position that a direct assault would be too dangerous. The standoff continued, with both sides refusing to yield on the question of hostages accompanying the robbers. So through the whole thing, the entire focus is the hostages. So on the fourth day, police... Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, if you think about, first of all, who just picks up a phone in a bank vault and is able to call the prime minister? Like, is there like a bank phone book where it's like, oh, I need to call the prime minister. Let me go ahead and do that.
Right. Yeah. They just had a direct line to the prime minister. Like, yeah, I'll call us. He's got his cell phone number. Right.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if there's a direct, if it's in a bank vault and there's a direct line to the prime minister, that wouldn't actually surprise me.
Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah. You might be absolutely right about that.
But again, I think a lot of that is just more theater. But if you contrast her call with his call, she's calling the prime minister, making demands as if on behalf of the captors with the same level of vigor and insistence. While when he gets on the phone, he's like, yeah, do it or I'll kill them. And knowing that they probably heard that phone call, it's just showing that I can keep these people hostage. I can put nooses around their neck and I can terrify the living daylights out of them. Not only are they going to love me and worship me, they're also going to do my bidding, and I can talk about killing them right in front of them and they'll still do what I say.
Yeah. Oh, and yeah, that's a great point.
That dynamic, because if you think about it, that psychological dynamic right there exists in our society between people and corporations, between people and whatever level of governance we have going on. It exists everywhere else. It's the exact same thing.
Yeah, it's all fear-based mind control. Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, that's a great point. So we get to the fourth day, and police drilled a hole through the vault ceiling from the apartment directly above. Through this aperture, they photographed the interior of the vault, producing the now widely circulated image of hostages Brigitte Lund and Elizabeth Ogden seated, and Sven Svalstorm standing beside Clark Olofsson, fired his weapon into the hole on two separate occasions, wounding a police officer. in the hand and face. And I'm pretty sure that's the picture they're talking about right there.
I just don't think you're going to be drilling into a Swedish vault from an apartment upstairs. I
Right,
don't
yeah,
know.
like how really the people in the apartment could just drill through the floor and fucking get bank
Yeah,
vault? Like what?
honey, get the drill. The power bill's here.
Right. Yeah, straight up. So yeah, so and then we get to Inmark calls Palm a second time displeased. The day after Olafson's death threat to Palm, Kristen Inmark called the Prime Minister again. She expressed her displeasure at his refusal to allow the robbers and hostages to leave together, and reiterated that Olsen and Olafson should be permitted to exit freely before any police action. She also specifically instructed that the robbers depart ahead of the hostages to shield them from police fire. So she's putting herself in front of them as a shield now. And then so that brings us to day 6, which is the actual resolution of the standoff. So on day 6 of the standoff, Swedish police deployed tear gas through the hole drilled in the vault ceiling. Olsen had previously threatened to kill the hostages if such an action were taken. Despite this, the gas was used. Within approximately 30 minutes, both Olsen and Olafson surrendered. None of the 4 hostages sustained any physical injuries during the entire 6-day ordeal. So Jan Erik Olsen was taken into police custody at the bank entrance, photographed in handcuffs and escorted by officers wearing gas masks. Clark Olafson was also arrested. Both were charged in connection with the robbery. Olsen was ultimately sentenced to 10 years in prison. Olafson argued at trial that he had only participated to protect the hostages by keeping the situation calm. His conviction was overturned on appeal and he was acquitted. And I think it's just cute and adorable that they say that he argued that he was only there to participate to keep the hostages safe, when like acting like he had any choice in the matter whatsoever.
Right.
Like they literally just went and got him from prison and say, "Hey, this is what you're doing today. I know how prison works. You don't have a choice, bro."
You're
What are
getting
you talking about?
getting transferred today. Nah, I'm good.
Yeah, right. No, I'm okay. I don't want to do that. Like, no, get up.
No, there's totally like a bank robbery and you have to go be a part of it. Nah, I'm gonna stay. I got chow here in a minute.
Yeah, yeah, that's not how it works, dude. So I just thought that was adorable that they acted like he had a choice. But following their release, all 4 hostages declined to cooperate fully with prosecutors against Olsen and Olafson. They visited both men in prison during their sentences. Kristen Inmark and Clark Olafson's maintained contact for years afterward, with their family becoming friends. The hostages consistently characterized their fear of the police, not of Olsen, as the dominant experience of the crisis. So that is the origins of Stockholm Syndrome. Is that robbery right there? That's where the entire thing comes from. So do you got anything you want to add to that before we start moving on to Mr.
No,
Neal's?
I think it's much, well, for me, it's easier to understand not necessarily what Stockholm syndrome is and how it came about, but why it came about and what its ultimate intent was on the global mind. Because I think there's a
Yeah.
lot more in there picking apart, because I always like to pick apart the mechanisms of control to figure out exactly what tentacles are where and how deep some roots go, that kind of thing. But I think getting into the aftermath, especially the development of the term, is where we really get into the meat and potatoes.
Yeah, absolutely. Because they can't pull any of these psychological operations off. They have to have a catalyst. It's all gotta
Yes.
there has to be a certain event for them to crank this widget and turn it into a psychological operation. And that was the event. So now we get into the aftermath of the event. And yeah, that's like Whitestone just said, we're gonna really see the mechanisms, see the wheels start turning now and who's involved in all of this stuff. So this is August 23rd to 28th. When 1973, the days of the robbery, when Jan Erik Olsen seized the Credit Banken on August 23rd, 1973, Stockholm Police Department leadership called Bergerat, which I think is interesting. They called him day one. Didn't even, they didn't even try and negotiate by themselves. But he was already a consulting psychiatrist for them since 1958 too. But they called him to serve as a psychiatric advisor to an operational command team. He remained embedded with the police leadership for the entire 6 days of the standoff, continuously assessing the psychological state and behavioral probabilities of Clark Olofsson and Jan Erik Olsson, advising the command on the risk level to the hostages and building the strategic case for holding firm against the robbers' demands. So they got to put some statistics on it. They need probabilities and statistics. So that's what they call this guy.
The statistics confuse people because they're numbers and they're hard, and only smart people know that.
Yeah, well, and it's something solid that somebody smarter than you gave you, like, well, he said it was only 2 to 3% likely. So, he knows he's the expert. Yep. So the core of Bergerat's operational contribution was a formal probabilistic, which is like a probability, risk assessment of hostage safety. From his knowledge of criminal behavior patterns built over decades of working with incarcerated criminals, he concluded that Clark Olofsson, as a commercial criminal rather than a political terrorist, had no rational incentive to harm the hostages. The hostages were his only negotiating asset. Bergerat estimated the probability of the hostage harm at 2 to 3% under unfavorable conditions, meaning only if the police acted precipitously and denied Olsson sufficient time to recognize his defeat with a prolonged and calibrated pressure strategy. He asserted the risk as virtually zero.
Again, I'd point out the terms in there. They referred to Olofsson as a commercial criminal. Yeah. So we're talking about, the commercial realm. And then they're in that same sentence, they're referring to the hostages as assets and negotiating assets.
Yep.
And he said it's like they would actually have no rationale for hurting the hostages because that's their sureties. That's their collateral. It's like if you don't have any leverage whatsoever, then you've got nothing. So he has to keep it alive. And it's the same, and I'm sure in a lot of different transactions, it's like you got to make sure that you've got sureties or that your collateral is in place or whatever else.
And I will say that's true. I will say that is definitely a true thing. But what I'm also going to say is that robbing a bank is an irrational act on its face. Yep. So you can't say these are rational criminals and give them a 2 to 3% probability of harming their victims on, because they're thinking rationally, because they're already committing an unrational act. So for you to give them 2 to 3% of probability of harming these people that's one of the biggest things that this is like. This whole thing is a psyop here, and they just needed a number to put on it.
Because how do people cover up their sin? With another sin.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you're not going to commit a sin, get yourself into a good bargaining position, and then righteously leverage your way out. You're just not going to do it.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's such a silly point to me. But central to Bergerat's analysis was a taxonomic distinction between two categories of hostage takers: commercial criminals, who take hostages as a negotiating tool and have no incentive to harm them, and political terrorists who may harm or kill hostages in the pursuit of ideological objectives. He classified Olsson unambiguously as a commercial criminal, intelligent, rational, and motivated entirely by financial escape. Bergerat argued, based on international data he had reviewed, that no criminal of this type had ever intentionally harmed hostages in a barricade situation, which I don't fucking believe, but whatever. The deaths that occurred in similar events elsewhere were caused by crossfire between criminals and police, not by deliberate hostage execution, which I would have to dig into that to, if there's, see if that's like legitimate, but that's what the Niels Bergerat, the guy that they called in, that's what he said. So during the stand-up,
real quick background on this guy, Bergerat.
Well, we are going to get into that.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, that's coming up next. Yeah.
I just wanted to prep people's minds, like know where this guy came from, look at the conclusions he came to, and it tells you everything.
Yeah, that's actually why I wanted to get to his conclusions first, because it's
Okay.
actually once we get into his biography, it's going to make a lot more sense why he came to these conclusions. So, um, so during the standoff, Bergeron and the police leadership faced significant public and academic pressure to capitulate to Jan Erik Olsen's demands. 9 criminology professors, which is another very important number, 9 criminology professors at Stockholm University signed and circulated a public petition demanding that police allow Olsen to leave the bank with the hostages and the ransom, warning that continued resistance would result in a bloodbath. So they need the academic contestation here. So this is basically, haha, we proved you wrong right here. They have these 9 professors write and say, oh, you need to get rid of them to it's the dialectic. They need the dialectic to balance out Bergeron. So Associate Professor Gustav Johnson made the same argument on national television. Bergeron refused to yield, and the police command held its position. So they're getting all of this resistance from the public and the professional class saying, just let them go like you would in a normal situation.
Give them what they want. Appease them.
Exactly. Give them what they want. You have to appease them to prevent harm. That's a negotiation tactic that everybody knows. That's basics. That's negotiation basics right there. But and that's what everybody's obviously saying here, but they need their guy to be right, They need him to be right.
Well, that's good. So you're talking about basically controlled opposition to give the illusion that there is a dialectic or a back and forth happening that will hopefully reach a conclusion.
Exactly.
But they're controlling both the narratives.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's exactly what I'm saying right there. So now that we know the conclusion he came to, and we know that there was so much resistance into him. So let's get into this guy. After I started reading this, I'm like, who the fuck is this guy? So so let's figure out who he is. So Niels Bergeron was born on September 21st, 1921 in I don't even know what Stockholm County, Sweden. His father was employed as a bank teller and at the local Upland Bank, which goes back to all of your bank connections there. His dad was
they're always the children of bankers or
always. Yep. So a biographical detail that carries an ironic resonance given Bergeron's later role as a psychiatric advisor during Sweden's most dramatic bank robberies. He was not an academically driven child.
So ironic.
Yeah, so ironic. Yeah. He was not an academically driven child. His early passions were scouting and outdoor life. So, which is another common theme with these fucks, is they are never academically inclined in the beginning. So
he was just a normal guy who was not a prodigy, and look at the conclusions he came to. How normal is that?
Right, how normal is that? Yeah. So in 1936, the Bergeron family relocated to Östhammar after his father received a new assignment. The same year, at age 15, Bergeron was diagnosed with pulmonary tuberculosis and admitted to a sanitarium for 3 years of treatment. He later described this period as unexpectedly formative and even positive, noting the camaraderie among patients, despite the fact that roughly 1/3 of them died during a stay. His year in the sanatorium, which would be unbelievably traumatic for a 15-year-old, but his years in the sanatorium appeared to have deepened his clinical instruction for observing human behavior under conditions of confinement and mortality. So, I mean, that kind of seems like a psychological torture, maybe.
Here's the thing. It's like, you've got a guy witnessing an event that, involves psychological trauma and power dynamics and, like withholding of resources and that kind of thing. But his entire childhood was colored while being in that environment. So is he really being objective here? Because if he spent 3 years of his formative years between 15 and 18, a lot of brain development going on there. And he spent 3 years in a sanatorium, which, this is what, I mean, I don't know how great sanatoriums were in the 1930s. I'm going to guess not awesome.
Not too good,
conditions were probably pretty austere. I mean, this is 3 to 6 years after FDR took over. So you've got, this big, the New Deal package coming out, everything's getting reformulated, the socioeconomic structure is getting shifted around. So, being in a sanatorium, you're living under austere conditions, probably not a lot of resources. You're sick, everyone's dying, and your caregivers are literally your lifeline.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so
Yeah.
he's seeing that same dynamic in the vault, where you've got people who don't have resources, who might be hungry, against their aggressors who are giving them, little tools of life. I wonder if he's like, I'm already programmed to see this, and that's what I'm seeing.
Well, I mean, it's got to be I think this is a time where they programmed him. I think they did something to this boy between the ages of 15 and 18, because after this is when his life obviously starts taking off. And they said he was not academically inclined when he was a child.
No, and he
So,
loved the camaraderie among the patients. He loved the
yeah,
fact that they were all dying and being starved.
exactly.
Our captivity was literally so good.
Exactly. So Bergerac completed his medical training. Wait, so yeah, we got. Yeah, okay, so yeah. So Bergerac completed from the 1940s and 1950s. He was medically trained. So Bergerac completed his medical training and began clinical work at Söderjyskön, or I don't know, and St. Göran Hospital in Stockholm. From 1958 onward, he served as a consulting psychiatrist to the Stockholm Police Department, giving him daily contact with career criminals, alcoholics, and drug addicts in custody. From 1965, he also served as a consulting physician to the Stockholm Remand Prison. This embedded role within the criminal justice system, unusual for a psychiatrist, gave him the observational data that would underpin his behavioral methodology at Norrmalmstorg.
Whoa. You know what's crazy? I just realized this, man. Because after going through and reading the notes last night, I had underlined this, that it gave him the observational database that would underpin his behavioral methodology, which means that as he started to develop what he was calling Stockholm Syndrome, he was using people in prison as his target population to build a database. So he was looking at how people who are already in prison, how they're responding, and then use that to build the definition of Stockholm Syndrome. And we all know that psychology inside of prisons is not the same as it is in the real world. But if you intend on using these outcomes and these clinical results on a very large population on a prison planet, then I guess you're going to use a prison for your database if you're building a framework.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's absolutely right. That's why, I mean, he just seems set up for this his entire life. This was, this was just his fate. And then, so this is very interesting, I think. In 1963,
I'm glad you're hitting it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So in 1963, Niels Bergerac studied epidemiology and medical statistics at London School of Hygiene and Topical Medicine on a grant from who? The World Health Organization. This training, This training shaped his approach to drug abuse as a public health epidemic, rather than a purely moral or criminal matter, while simultaneously reinforcing his conviction that drug use required criminal deterrence to contain its spread. The methodological precision he acquired in London would later inform his risk probability framework at Norrmalmstorg. You got anything you want to add to that? Oh, I think you're muted.
Oh yeah, so no, I really just had to clench my jaw this entire time because I got so much to say about this. So
I knew this is where you wanted to go. Yep.
Because this right here is already teeing up for what we experience in 2020, folks. Like, this is how far back it goes. One thing that we need to look at here is, the London School of Hygiene. So London has a couple different schools. There's the London School of Hygiene. One that most folks might be familiar with is the London School of Economics. And the London School of Economics is a big Ivy League school, which is a lot like, Georgetown or Harvard or Yale. They're basically training and recruiting grounds for the best and brightest minds, and they're also strongholds of social engineering. And the London School of Economics is mostly responsible for developing these psychological attitudes about economics and money the world over. really come out of the schools of thought of the London School of Economics. So the other branch here, we're talking about medicine, epidemiology, which is already, he's studying epidemics. And it's like in 2020, we had an epidemic. We also had this same programming that they're working on right here. So
an epidemic of Stockholm Syndrome. That's what we had.
an epidemic of fear, an epidemic of terror. And so, getting trained there and working there really does say a lot. They're, like you said, they're already queuing up for the public health epidemic. And rather than public health epidemic being, like, let's say a viral so-called outbreak, a parasite outbreak, or something biological, they're saying drug abuse, which is like a nebulous, ephemeral thing. They're now saying that is an epidemic. So they're already labeling things as epidemics, which don't actually have to do with the body, or don't have to do with, like physically getting sick.
Oh yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, this is
the tee. I think this really is the tee up where, again, they play the long game. They think in terms of 100 to 300 years, and they put their systems in place to achieve that. And all these patrician noble families are born into it, and they just are trained in it, and they keep the roll going. And so
they plan their work and they work their plan.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep.
Anyway, that's kind of what I wanted to say on that. Is I'm really just trying to link, because people think, oh, that was in the 60s. It's like, that is our perception. Like I said, they think in 200 to 300 years. So they might say, between 1930 and 1965, this is what we want to get done. Here's our plan. Let's execute. Okay, we're coming up on the end. We're going from 1965 now to 1988. This is our plan. This is what we're going to do. There's lots of that going on. That's why I wanted to break down this episode the way I did too, because as we're going through this time, I mean, you can see just the obvious setup here. I mean, through this whole guy's whole life, he was set up to do this thing at Stockholm that day. That his entire life led up to this one decision, because it's only 4 years after that the robbery, or no, it's 10 years after that, but still. So he has 10 years of training at the World Health Organization before Isn't it weird? He's getting a bunch of training that just so happens to prime him perfectly for the position that he's going to take, and then define everything that he was trained in before it happened.
It's just a one big happy coincidence.
Wow.
So let's finish up this last point here. Bergeron became research fellow in the drug dependence at the Swedish National Medical Research Council, and was subsequently appointed reader in social medicine at Karolinska Institute, one of the world's leading medical universities. His drug research made him the most influential voice in Swedish narcotics policy. He argued that drug abuse could transform from a symptom to a disease in its own right, an early articulation of what would later become the addiction as disease model. So that, which I used to go to AA and shit. So that is kind of, that's very interesting right here, that he's so heavily connected with that too. Because I actually don't know how I feel about that anymore. I used to think addiction was a disease, but now I think you're lacking purpose in your life is really the problem there.
And the recovery programs are actually part and parcel of the terror and initial fear itself. A lot of these recovery programs were developed by the very same people that developed labels like Stockholm Syndrome and instituted them either as operational frameworks or, like referential understanding points. And so you got to understand, it's like they're giving you the poison, and then they're turning around and giving you the remedy.
Yeah, I mean, Bill W., the guy who they credit starting AA, I mean, he was an alcoholic stockbroker. That's what he was. He was trading stocks and shit, and there's apparently like Rockefeller connections to him and shit. Like,
there's Crowleyan, the AA.
Yeah, exactly. The symbols they use and the whole thing, which I don't want to talk shit about anybody. Like, if you're in recovery, like, it did save my life. I will say that.
Yeah.
Going into AA saved my life.
I think having
I don't want to talk shit, but yeah.
Having a community of people who have a shared struggle and sharing information and encouraging one another and holding each other accountable is, I think, absolutely an essential part of it.
Yeah.
But when that whole necessity is packaged through their perspectives, their language, their symbols, their devices and things like that, it's being used in a, you know, in a different way. And it might not be in your best interest. But like I said, I've known plenty of people that went through those programs and had massive amount of success, and they did not come out part of the brainwashed OTO, Aleister Crowley,
Right.
Hermetic
Yeah. Yeah.
Dawn. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Yeah, and the only thing I'll say, the one thing I'll say that I don't like is once you get in the program, they say you have to stay right there, and your spirituality cannot venture out. And they put a cap on your spirituality.
yep.
And the only reason I am the way I am is because I took that cap off of myself. I wanted to know where AA came from and like dig a little deeper and really understand where and it comes from first century Christianity, the four tenets of first century Christianity. They broke it up into 12 parts because they figured the four tenets were just too complex for drug addicts and alcoholics to understand. So they broke it into 12 parts, 12 easily understandable parts, which I agree with. And it's a great framework, but also they say, once you're there, dude, you're stuck. You got to stay with these addicts. You got to stay in this. It's like a cult. You're not allowed to go anywhere else. You have to. This is your new family now.
And you know what? It also shares parallels with Masonry, because in AA, they say you don't have to believe in any particular God. You just have to believe in a higher power.
Yeah,
And
a God of your understanding is what they call it. Yep.
One of the requirements for membership and being inducted into a lodge is that you also have to believe in a higher power.
Oh,
and
yeah, and it doesn't have to be a specific higher power.
doesn't
Yeah,
have
that's
to be
a great
specific one.
point.
It's not. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's, and I don't know, is the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, is it 12 steps and then the other branch is 33 or something like that?
No,
Or
Scottish Rite is 33. They're the ones with 33.
Oh yeah, Scottish Rite is 33.
Yeah.
I think it's the Royal Arch might be, it's less than 30.
Yeah, they're a little bit. Yeah, they're different. Yep.
So
Yep.
again, there's that. And I actually have, about the AA thing, is there was a period in my life where I had just completely cut out alcohol altogether because I just, I didn't need it anymore. And I have maybe one drink a year. But I went to it. I had not had anything to drink for like, a year and 3 months. I decided to go to an AA meeting just to, have like-minded
Check it
people.
out. Yeah.
And I basically told my story, and no kidding, the guy that was leading the meeting is like, wow, year and a half. Imagine where you could go if you had the program. And I was like, well, I didn't say anything. I was nice and I was polite, but for years I was like, yeah, but I did it for 15 months, like a year and a half without ever doing any of this. Why would I need to start?
See, and I think honestly, I think everybody should go through the 12-step program once in a life because of what it makes you do. It makes you make amends for all of your past mistakes, and it really gets you in gear for living a different life. So like I understand his sentiment, but to say it like that, oh, that's cool,
Yeah.
buddy, but you're not as cool as us because you haven't done this. Like
Yeah,
the
well,
attitude,
well,
the smug attitude that he had about it, like, go fuck yourself, dude.
It's like, wouldn't you be more interested in what it is that I was doing for that year and a half that kept myself accountable without your program?
No,
Like,
because they don't think it's possible.
well,
So,
and that's the thing. And I was like,
yeah.
Because I really did. I changed my purpose in life. I changed my hobbies, everything down to what I was wearing, what I was living, how I spoke, how I wrote, used language. I started changing a lot of that stuff, and it just became this big self-reinforcing thing, and it just helped. And so,
I mean, I bet you found a purpose. You found something that you actually wanted to live
I
for.
think
Yeah.
it's just interesting to go into one of those organizations and they see how much progress you could make. And then they go, wow, imagine how far you could get with us. It's like, yeah, but I see that your program is there for people who have a hard time going 6 minutes or, a day without something. I went a year and a half and I'm fine. So anyway, it's probably a little off the rails, but
Yeah, no, yeah, that's we did get off on a little tangent, but it is a position that I hold pretty dear to my heart because I was very heavily involved for a long time, and then I went to a conference in Grand Rapids, and it literally knocked me off of my rocker to see how programmed these people were. and to see how easily programmed these people were because of what they were following in the program. And it really disillusioned me with a lot of stuff. I mean,
Do you
it
think
fucking,
that that's
yeah.
what it is they take people who absolutely need help and they are giving them help, but they're programming them at the same time because they're in like a vulnerable state because of their condition?
You get programmed to stay right here. They're like, they give you help. It is a legitimate form of help against drug addiction. I will say that. You can stop using drugs through the AA program. But once you start doing that, don't let them convince you that that's the only way to do anything in your life. Because they will. That's the whole point. And that's when it gets cultish.
You got to stay in the program.
Exactly. That's when it gets cultish. And that's when once I broke away from that and started actually getting into the Bible and everything, then I was like, okay, like I'm getting way further doing this than I was staying there doing the same thing over and over and over and over again.
No, same here. And you know what's interesting about those clubs too is they say, you're doing great, but at any moment you could fall. You're still fragile. At any moment you need us. And that is also actually part to tie it back in. That's the type of programming that we're talking about, which is there's an uneven power dynamic where they convince you or make you completely dependent on them for encouragement or accountability or food or water or shelter, whatever it might be. And they keep you in that malleable, open state of suggestibility to thinking that you are actually not capable and inherently weak and that they must take care of you.
Yeah, that's literally what it is. And that's what disillusioned me so much. So like if you're in the program and you're getting everything that you need out of it, please do that. But don't let them direct your spirituality. That's all I'm going to say to that. And but I think a reason why we're harping on this so much is because his strict policy position, Niels Bergerat, the guy we were talking about, was drugs should be made unavailable and socially unacceptable with criminal penalties as a central deterrent. And this is in 1965 to 73. What else do we have in 1973? Reagan's war on drugs.
Yep.
He's the precursor to this.
Yep. So they're already setting themselves up in the social consciousness in something seemingly unrelated. So that way it seems like, oh, this is a ubiquitous concern. We got psychiatrists over here, we got academics over here, and law enforcement over here, and all these different people running into these same issues. That's enough for us to launch a war on drugs. Look at this consensus we have.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. So I think that's why we're drilling down on that point so much, because hey, dude, this guy was right there in the middle of all this stuff. So that we're getting ready to wrap it up for the first hour though. So what we're gonna do in the second hour was we're gonna get into the actual formal analysis of the term and the coinage of the term and how they talk about it in the FBI and the academic contestation, because there's a lot of academic contestation to this Stockholm Syndrome thing. So we're going to get into all of that in the second hour, and then hopefully we'll have time to get into the Patty Hearst kidnapping, because that is the event that happened after all of this stuff to really solidify the identity of Stockholm Syndrome and give them something to point at. So if you guys are interested in that, all you have to do is go to truelifeproduction.com, click the Learning Out Loud podcast banner up at the top, become a member for $8 a month, and you can get all of the extra goodies for the show, including the second hour transcript, all that stuff. You can download the video, everything right from the website. Watch it all ad-free over there. So that's all we got for the first hour today. Hope to see everybody over at truelifeproduction.com as a subscriber to listen to the second hour. And never forget to seek truth and honor the Creator above all, and let that be the whole of the law.
That's the important thing here, is that everyone's word should be meant for a use.
And the words that I'm using today are meant to pull down idols within people's temples.
Meaning that I want to destroy
Falsities that they have idolized.
for their entire life.
And just pull those out and sweep them clean. And before that temple,
And get reinfested with a new lie. Give it true life.